Joining us on Houston Sports Talk is one of our regulars. She's our Rockets insider, the Houston Chronicle's Rockets beat writer, Jenny Dial Creech. Jenny, this week we were supposed to be talking about the Rockets' round 2 opponent and the great I-10 series against the Spurs. Well, didn't happen, and you just got through talking with the players at the Toyota Center as we record Monday. What did they have to say as they were leaving for the summer?
From what I could tell, they had a really good team meeting today. Coach was not there, so it was, led by players. They talked to each other about what they could learn. I think the shock from the other night was over, and they could really kind of focus on where they needed work, and it sounded like it was productive. They were all really upset. They are all still very bummed about the season being over. They certainly didn't think it'd be over this soon, but it did sound like today was a lot more productive than than the last few days have been, as they've been sort of getting over that initial shock.
When the season started, the expectation for fans and the players in this organization was, nothing less than the Western semis would be a big disappointment. Do you feel like they underachieved this season?
To me, it's really hard to say because this is a team with a ton of talent. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you look across the board and on paper, they have just a handful of players that are really good players. But you are throwing a brand new team together, and you're trying to make that work with new leadership, with Dwight Howard coming in. You have to learn how to play the game with him. Then they had so many injuries. I don't think anyone really saw that coming. And then, their lineups changed so many times this year that it was kind of, I don't know that they underachieved. I think, all things considered and everything that they had to deal with, all with the pressure of being like this brand new team that's supposed to, change the face of Houston basketball. I don't think they underachieved. I think they need another year. If you look across the league and you look at some of the teams that are doing really well now, they had a couple years to get their guys together. Obviously, San Antonio is one to look at. They've had the same core group forever. Portland is a very good example. They weren't good, and now they are, and they didn't really make personnel changes. They just got a year under their belt together, got used to playing together, and now, you could tell that this year they had 4 players start every single game this year. That's crazy that to only have 2 starting lineups. The Rockets had 16. It's really hard to find consistency in a situation that the Rockets had. Look at a team like the Clippers. Remember when they were the worst team in the league? And then they got a core group together, kept them together for a couple of years, and now they're one of the better teams. So, personally, I think one of the worst things that could happen to this Rockets team is for them to just keep dicing them up and bringing in more people. I think if you kept this core group together for a year or two, they'd be really, really good and up there at the top.
I agree with you, Jenny, as far as for the building chemistry part and keeping a team together over that. I think where a lot of us, though, have difficulty accepting this is that the Rockets, our expectations going into the season would at least be a team that makes it to the Western Conference semifinals, to the second round, and that's where I think most of us think they underachieved, is not advancing further in the playoffs. And granted, they went up against a very good Portland Trailblazers team. They were a 4th seed going up against a 5th seed, but still you had that expectation. Regular season met expectations, postseason didn't.
Well, yeah, and the first round, I think something has to be said. You saw this Portland team coming off. They just rallied so late this season. And the second I saw them win that game against Golden State late in the season, that was one of the best games in the regular season across the board in the league this year. You just knew they were coming in with sky-high confidence at the exact right time. And that's hard. And then the other thing is, look at this series. It was decided by what? A total of 3-4 points total of the whole 6 games. That's you could flip a coin in this series, honestly. And then it's finished with a fadeaway outside jump shot that rarely goes in. I know everyone thought that they would be going to the next round, but I think that, if you look at the whole series and you look at how close it was and how even these teams were, in some time, people will get some perspective and see that in a series that great, anyone could have come out of there, and that you don't have to be quite as disappointed as you are. But it'll take some time to get to that point.
You just mentioned the Lillard shot, and a lot of people are wondering what kind of went wrong on that play. How did he get so wide open? What kind of explanation have you heard from the Rockets about that?
Well, there hasn't been like a straight up explanation, but we've all watched it a million times, of course. And so basically the first option on that play, as Portland said, was to actually get the ball into Lillard and tie the game. They weren't necessarily going for the win. They just wanted to try to stay in it when you have, 0.9 seconds on the clock. That's your best option. So they had Dwight down low on Aldridge, which makes perfect sense to me. Then basically they had a couple of different schemes that would have, Beverly guarding Lillard if Lillard was trying to drive, or Chandler driving Lillard or guarding Lillard if he was going to take an outside shot, so they could have the height on him. Again, something they've done all year, which makes sense. It looked like to me the Rockets were expecting there to be a screen and Lillard to get that shot, and they tried to make a late switch to cover that, and they were just too late on it, which so I don't think it was a blown assignment or anything like that. I think they were trying to make the right switch for the play, and they were too late to get there. If you watch that play again and you see how quick the release of that, the catch and release of that shot is, I'm not sure anyone could get there in time.
It was a failed defensive switch there, as you mentioned. But what about Kevin McHale putting in Francisco Garcia for James Harden in that last play?
I think you have your guys in that got you to that situation, and he left them in. I personally don't have a problem with that. So, I mean, Garcia had been on the bench all night. It was cold. Yeah, he'd get in there and jump around a little bit, but your starters, or not necessarily your starters. It was like Lynn, Beverly, Parsons, Dwight, Harden on the game. I mean, they got you to that situation, and he rode with them in the last 0.9 seconds.
Well, despite a good game 6, James Harden struggled for the third straight playoff series in 3 years, going back to the Thunder series last year and the Heat series in the finals. His numbers, I believe his last numbers were 37.6% from the field and under 30% from three. They're falling a little bit more each year of the last 4 years for Harden. Me personally, I've been vocal about that the Rockets aren't going anywhere if James Harden doesn't figure this out in the playoffs. He needs to be the Rockets' best offensive player. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think the thing when you get to the playoffs, which we've talked about before, there's a difference between a great team during the year and then a team that can really follow a scouting report and play in a 7-game series. That's why you see some of these lower seeds sometimes come up and win, because they have the coaching to go out there, scout the team, and get so used to a player that they can guard him. And that's what Portland did to Harden. Wes Matthews did a tremendous job guarding Harden. I mean, if you go back and watch some of those games, he was all over him. And I think it was, he took Harden completely out of his rhythm. And, when you have a great scouting report and you game plan around a player, which they clearly did for Harden, that's going to happen. So Harden's going to have to rise above, being so scoutable. He's just going to have to stick to his instincts, take it to the rim, do the things that he does well, and break down those defenses. And I think by the end of the series, we saw that start to happen, but it was definitely too little too late.
What are your thoughts on adding Carmelo Anthony this offseason? I saw that Jonathan Fagan, your colleague, he talked to Daryl Morey about that possibility, and he had some interesting things to say. Talk a little bit about what he had to say, and then, kind of where you are on the adding of Carmelo this offseason.
Look, I mean, the best option for anybody, putting a team together is there's a great player available and you can get him, you go get him. And I understand that. I understand that's the thinking, and it makes sense. There's no fault in that thinking. Me personally, I don't see a team with Carmelo Anthony and James Harden on it together working. I don't see the two of them in a starting rotation together working. I could be completely wrong. I certainly have been before, but I don't like that combination. I think it's two guys who take a whole lot of shots, that want the ball in their hands, and that for what the Rockets want to do, this fast-paced flowing offense, you can't have the ball stick to two guys. I don't see it working. But, on the flip side of that, if Carmelo Anthony wants to come here and you can afford him, it's, you'd hear it for the rest of your life if you didn't take that guy. So I don't know. There's different ways to look at that. I just don't, in my head, I can't imagine that working. I really, truly believe that if the Rockets kept their core together, that they would have a much bigger season next year. Like, a year of experience can go a long way, and you don't see that often enough in the NBA, I don't think. I think that there's way too many changes every year.
Hey, Jenny, the Rockets are obviously going to make some roster additions and subtractions. That's Daryl Morey's way. And I agree with you about keeping the core there and building that team chemistry. But what areas do you think need to be improved? What particular need or addition do you think the Rockets should look to get this offseason?
I think they just need to improve the quality of their bench, honestly. I mean, I'm fine with the starters, whether it's Lynn or Beverly in there. I mean, if you could go out and get a much more well-rounded point guard to where you didn't really need the two of them to complement each other, that'd be great. But if you can't, they work well together. That works. But there's just not a lot coming off the bench. We just saw so many spurts of. Sometimes Caspi was okay. Sometimes Garcia was pretty good. I mean, they add Jordan Hamilton. He dropped out of the rotation so fast. Demo was so in and out and all over the place. They didn't get a lot out of their bench. And I think if you want to be a team that's going to go far in the playoffs, you better have something coming off the bench. And I think that's certainly the case when you look at the team still standing right now. And I just feel like the Rocket, and some of that, in their defense, is, those guys are not bad players, but since they changed their lineups over and over and over and over again, largely due to injury, they never really got some of that set. And it was, to me, that was obvious at the end of the year.
This weekend, the Chronicle reported that Kevin McHale would be back as the coach. And I thought all along McHale was coming back because how much he was liked by the players and how important he was in the acquisition of Dwight. I thought there would be a fear of losing this team, especially Dwight, if they made a coaching move. You've been around these guys all year long. Is that the impression that you got, is the reason why McHale is back?
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't think that McHale did anything that was fireable. Like, for the people that were calling for his head, I mean, that was a much better team this year than it was last year, and I think that was obvious. And yeah, the players love him, and they rally around him, and they believe in what he says. And you look around the league, once again, there's a lot of places where that is not the case. So not even just from the player standpoint, though, from actually watching this team this year, which I do understand that, unfortunately, a lot of people in this area didn't get to watch nearly as much as they would have liked to, so maybe they didn't see it as much. But I thought, again, all things considered, having to try all these different lineups and work around a lot of issues, work with a ton of young guys. I mean, when Dwight Howard is your veteran, you have a very young team. I thought McHale did a pretty decent job. I think there's some things he needs to work on, but I think overall that he brings something good to the table, and I was happy with that, and I think it's really going to help the Rockets to have him around again, because those players have bought into McHale, and I think you need that if you want to go far. I think you have to have players who have respect for the coach and want to do the things that he's trying to get them to do.
Jenny, wanted to ask you before you leave here about the other NBA playoff series. Now that we know the Blazers have advanced, beaten the Rockets, they're going to be playing San Antonio, and another series out west that looks to be very interesting, the Oklahoma City Thunder going up against the Los Angeles Clippers. First of all, what are your thoughts on the Western Conference? And maybe we can do a little bit about the East, but figure that Miami's probably coming out of that conference still.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, the Western Conference, just like every year, it's so up in the air. I mean, San Antonio yesterday or Sunday when they in their game 7, if they play like that, I don't and like no one can beat them. When their shooters are on and all their old guys are, playing like they're 20 years younger, you just can't beat them. But look at how they played in some of the other games against Dallas. That, if they do that, they're done. It's, the consistency has to be there. Same thing with Oklahoma City. I mean, Oklahoma City at times looked really great, but when you have to have all these last second heroic shots to beat Memphis, I think that's a problem. I really do. I think that they have a lot that they need to get together in a hurry as well. So the Clippers, before the playoffs start, I thought them and Golden State were two of the hottest teams, and I think that showed in that series, and it was unfortunate that there was all this other drama and distraction with their owner that overshadowed that a little. But they look better. A year ago, the Clippers had some issues. Like I felt like their inside game wasn't very good, but with the way Jordan is playing, I think they're going to be tough. So, it's like I still think to me, the two best teams in those are the Clippers and the Spurs, but they have to be consistent and they have to play the way that they can to get there. My one concern with Portland, I would put Portland in a much higher category, but even with 4 days of rest or whatever, I can't imagine that they're not just beyond exhausted after that series with the Rockets. That was so draining that I think it's gonna take a lot for them to get their heads away from that and on to the next round.
Is there anything catching your eye in the Eastern Conference? We all seem to think, well, Miami's going to come out of that conference and play either the Spurs or the Clippers or the Blazers or the Thunder. But, what do you think of the Eastern Conference?
Well, I think a lot of people wanted Toronto to win over the weekend, and I think that would have been really cool too. But then, Brooklyn is a team that at the beginning of the year, they were horrible. Like, they did not have it together. And the way that they improved and the way that their veterans have stepped up in these big game situations, to me, that makes them scary. I mean, there's really something to be said when you need to turn to a guy like Paul Pierce to save you. I believe that he's a guy who can still do that, as opposed to a rookie or a young guy or someone who's never been there before. So I do think that Brooklyn is going to be interesting to watch. I don't think they're as good as some of the other teams, but I think because of their veteran leadership, they might have a little bit of an edge.
I want to go back to your Spurs in Portland just real quick. Do you really feel like Portland's going to be too exhausted when the Spurs also did 7 games, or you think it's just the manner of the games makes it a little bit more exhausting for them?
I just think the Spurs have been there so many times that they're going to be less affected by. I saw a stat today. I'm going to get the numbers a little off, so bear with me. But it was like Tim Duncan has played in 200 playoff games, and all of the Trailblazers combined have played in like 170 or something. And so I just think that there is something to be said about a team that's been there. The Spurs are used to this, and the Trailblazers are coming out of the first round for the first time in forever on such a dramatic play. I mean, they're definitely on a high. They really should come out and play very well, but you just never know. You never know what a team who hasn't been there is going to do. And because they had to win not just the last game, but all 4 of their games in such dramatic fashion with, these really intense scores and it's just, to me, I'm really curious what they're going to do. I really am. I don't know what to expect from them. I think they're a fantastic team, though. I think their style is a lot like the Rockets. It was almost watching like mirror images play each other. I think they're a good team. I'd like to see them do well, actually, but I'm just really curious because of their second round matchup, how that's going to work.
That was why that series was so competitive too with the Rockets. I mean, those teams were mirror images of one another. I could have watched those games for, like Mike Tirico, I believe, said at the end of it, I could watch a best of 21 with these two teams.
Yeah, I mean, they're so similar. there really was a lot of mutual respect there too. I mean, it was a really, really good series. And again, I completely understand that for Rockets fans, it's really hard to look at it that way right now, but eventually I think people will. When they look at that series, it was such a good series. I mean, it was Lillard's coming out party. It was people finally starting to notice LaMarcus Aldridge. It was Dwight Howard, in my opinion, truly becoming the leader of the Rockets with the way he played and the way he motivated his team. It was, a series where we got to see Jeremy Lin kind of embrace his role and make the most of it. And I thought he had a really good series. I thought he played really well and gave it everything, that people have wanted from him all year. I thought that you see all these games just come down to the wire like that over and over again, no matter what adjustments the other team is playing. That was a very, very, very good basketball series. I could watch it over and over again as well.
I wish we were still watching it, or at least,
I
we
know.
got at least one more game out of that one would have been nice. Well, hey, it was so great to have you join us throughout the season. Jenny, really appreciate you coming on with us again.
Always fun to chat with you guys.
Well, that was the Houston Chronicles' Jenny Dial Creech. You can catch her stuff on chron.com. And if you want to catch any more of our interviews, check out houstonsportstalk.net.